PR Connections Radio presents. This podcast is brought to you by Envision U. Envision U has discovered how to impact spirit, body, and soul with spray technology in just 30 seconds. With Envision U, you can achieve optimal health and start living the life you have always dreamed of. Use the promo code envisionu.com/VernDix to take control of your health naturally.
Welcome, everyone, to JP's Teachers Lounge, Season 1, Episode 5. And I'm very excited because I have my very first guest, Mr. Erik Francis, who is the author, Inquiring Minds Want to Learn. Say hello, Mr. Francis.
Hey, Mr. Pasudich, how you doing? Or as I know you, yo, Pasudich, what's going on?
You always love using my last name, like a lot of people do. Yo, Pasudich.
Yo, Pasudich. Well, wait, how long have we known each other now?
Well, it's funny because we didn't just used to teach years ago. It was decades ago.
Decades ago. It was before the turn of the millennium when you and I were teaching. We were both rookies back then.
Yeah, 99. Because I remember I moved here in Las Vegas in 99. So it's been 26 years. It's got to be around the 25, 26 years. Actually, you know what? It might even be more than that because I think we were mid to late 90s. Because we left. So I guess we should tell them the story that, first of all, you and I taught in a place called Blythe, California. And when I tell people about Blythe, California, especially if you live in Arizona and California, or especially Arizona, I'd say, you know, when you go down to 10 to go to Disneyland and you stop at the Flying J right before the Colorado River to get the gas because it's cheaper. And then you stop over the Colorado River in this town at the McDonald's. That's Blythe. You know? Yeah, because I've talked to people. I remember driving back one time, going back to my mom's house in Torrance, and stopping, I think, like Palm Springs area, and I was getting gas on my way to my mom's house. About halfway, it's about halfway there, and I was talking to this young lady, and we're like, hey, how you doing? Blah blah blah. And it's like, yeah, I'm from Blythe, and I remember her saying, I always wondered who lives out there.
That's what everyone used to say to us. They're like, there's people out there. There's people that live. And there were good people.
There were. Mostly.
It was such a culture shock, I think, for both of us. I mean, you were an LA boy, and I was a boy from New York City, and then we get sold because they recruited us. If you remember, they recruited us out there, and they sold it like this Norman Rockwell town on the river, and then you get there. And it was like a cross between a John Steinbeck and a Big Jim Thompson novel, and I got to tell you, as tough as it was, I don't know. And I think you too, because we talked about this, is that I think that's where probably you and I learned how to be the good teachers that we are, because those kids were tough. And
not just that, but just I don't know, just growing up and adversity strengthens you, because I was just talking to my students today about the importance of teamwork or sports. We had at my school today, we had a little kind of like a impromptu assembly with boys. We're trying to set up a basketball team, and there was a cross country team, and they had to give up the cross country team because everyone started quitting.
Right.
And so I'm in a very small school, so it's one person quits, and then that can make the difference.
Right.
Like not having a season. And I shared with them the story. I said, look, being in team sports, I mean, whether it's team sports or on the drama club or whatever, Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, it teaches you a lot of things being on a team sport. And I told him, I said, look, my first year teaching, I wanted to quit.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to just get out. It's like, this ain't worth it. But somehow my dad's voice, son, don't quit. So, he was always my coach, at least up until high school. So I couldn't quit, my dad being the coach. So you learn a lot. You don't quit. You keep going, you'll get through it. And that's, that. And so I shared that with them, and now maybe it falls on deaf ears. I don't know, but it's again, adversity, and it was, for the most part, it was a good experience, I think. But it's good and bad. It's good and bad. Here in Las Vegas, people will run you off the road.
Yeah.
But in Blythe, go on in. There's very slower. Living was a lot slower, and you appreciate things. When I first moved there, who's doing what were we doing this weekend? It was almost like being on a cruise.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody go anywhere.
Right.
People aren't going to say, "Oh, we're busy." No, you're not busy. You're on the same boat I am. Let's have a party. Let's do something.
That was the thing about that town. It was a one-street town, pretty much.
Yeah.
The year I moved there, if you remember, that's when they reopened the movie theater.
That's right.
And it's built up since then. But if you even think about the population that we worked with, we had such a diverse population there, because we had the prison up there, the Ironwood. So you had the prison guards kids, and then you had the prisoners kids, and then you had the migrant farmer workers, their kids, and then you had the farmers kids, and so it was this big dichotomy, and
generation,
and talk about the fact that how many of them they knew life just in Blythe. They didn't know what life was like going west on the 10, maybe, east on the 10. Maybe they've been to Phoenix, maybe they've been to LA, but their lifestyle was so narrow. And you and I, we were single guys back then. We weren't, married, and
and I'm still single.
Well, I'm married and have kids, but what they didn't understand that. You and I were in our 20s, and they're like, "Well, why aren't you guys married? Where are your kids?" And we had a tough set of kids. You think about it, it's rural, and you wouldn't think in rural you would have what we had in terms of, we had gang issues. We had, the girl fights alone on the campuses there. You got to watch out, sheathe your claws, Wolverine. It was like Freddy Krueger versus Wolverine when they would start fighting. But, I think the good thing about it is that not only that you and I have had this bond now for, since the 90s, that we've always stayed connected with each other. But I think that's also where we became great teachers, because I think that it was tough. It hardened us. It made us empathetic. And I think also that, we made I don't know about you, but I made my biggest mistakes out there, in terms of connections with the kids, in terms of, getting upset when kids would act a certain way. And it really kind of opened my eyes to it. And I still take a lot of the stuff there. I'll never forget that. I don't know if you remember, because I was the last hired the first year when you and I worked together. You were there the year before. And they come to me and say, "Well, we don't have enough kids, but we'll give you 7th grade language arts, 6th grade language arts, and 2 7th grade math classes." And I remember saying to our principal at the time, "I'm not a math teacher. And, the AP that we work for, don't worry, we'll write a letter," and you can probably hear him say that. And then I get the math class. And again, this is my first year teaching, and the kids don't speak English. And I'm like, "Well, what am I supposed to do now?" I said to the principal, "Those kids don't speak English." And then the AP goes, "Yeah, we forgot to tell you about that." So you can probably hear him saying that, but still taking the lessons from it. And that's, I think, what really shaped a lot of what I do now. I still talk about the story about
how I taught the kids math who are non-English speakers through literacy using questioning, and you know, they did pretty well for a guy who was a rookie newbie that didn't even know what he was doing. So, but I still take those lessons with me today.
Yeah, that's great. And kind of a nice segue, because I know talking to Mr. Francis, I know we're going to talk about movies, and we'll get to Van Halen and Rush, and you know, I mentioned Rush in all my episodes, really. So, but we'll get to that. But you know, speaking of, you know, like learning your lessons, you know, yeah, Blythe, you know, is a training ground for a lot of newbies, and there isn't a whole lot to offer that there. You know, you go for 2 or 3 years, and that's where I ended up here, and you ended up in the Phoenix area. Right. But I remember there's a lot of lessons you learn from movies, and again, songs too. We'll get into that later. But one of my favorite movies is Almost Famous. I'm probably familiar with it.
Oh, yeah, of course, I love that movie. Yeah,
it's a great movie. And one of the, every once in a while, a movie will hit you, and a certain scene will hit you, and you go, wow, that's pretty. It not just it's good, but it makes you think, wow. It opens up a whole lot of possibilities, a whole lot of, like, I didn't realize that. The scene where they get their first concert T-shirt, and what's his name, Russell is in the front, and all the other guys in the background. Yeah. And so there's, okay, let's get into it, blah blah blah, you know. Oh yeah, and then there's the right. back and forth, and the vocalist, I forget his name, but the vocalist says, you know, we got to start taking responsibility of all the things that are happening around us. And Russell, the guitarist, says, hey, didn't we get into this to avoid responsibility?
Right.
And I was like, wow, rock stars or musicians, you never, it's always a mixed bag. You don't, oh, I want to be a teacher, but I just want to teach.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's obviously a lot more to that. And what I think about a lot is, okay, it's the 21st century. We have schools, and you were just talking about, like in Blythe, so many different socioeconomic people from socioeconomic backgrounds and everything, and then they come together to school. And schools used to be a place where all the values are reinforced, but a lot of values are not, you know, like they're not taught, they're not reinforced. And I keep thinking, okay, as a not only as a teacher, but just as schools in general, for the 21st century, what do you think the main responsibilities are for the teachers and for the schools in the 21st century?
Wow, that's a good question.
Well, I learned from you.
Wow.
I know it's pretty wide. I get it, but cut off a few. You know, I know it's a huge umbrella, but maybe
I think
cut off.
You know, I'm sorry. I mean,
no, go ahead.
I think the thing is, we need to bring back the joy of learning. I don't. And it's funny because this is something I'm actually talking about a lot in my professional learning lately, asking, are we performance based or are we learner based? Mm-hmm. And I got this idea, it's interesting. Someone, I forgot who might have told me, they said, I love the book Think Again by Adam Grant. And it's really a great book about rethinking. It really shaped my whole philosophy about why I do, how I do what I do. And I'm always rethinking, and I'm always asking myself, well, you know, I may be right, but why? You know, getting back into the music, you may be wrong, but you may be right, but why? And I think that's the thing, is that I think we got to get back to the idea of the joy and value of learning, the joy and value of curiosity, the joy and value of basically not knowing. And it's great when you don't know, because and it's really interesting because there's a thing in education they talk about, kick the IDK bucket, or I don't know. Well, why is that kid saying I don't know? Are they saying it really because they don't know? Or are they being dismissive saying I don't know? But really looking at it to say, well, okay, well, what do you know? And turning it back there, I really think that's somewhere along the line. And I may get bloody hell for this, but when I hear people say kids are safer in my classroom than they are at home, that's a real big concern. That's a real big concern, because if you know they're not safe at home, that's our responsibility to make sure that they are safe. I would flip that to say, I have these kids for 7 hours nonstop, in a controlled environment. If you think about it, we that's the power of a teacher. We actually spend more time nonstop with a child over a course of 5 days in a 7-day week, where the learning can be nonstop. And what are we doing within that 7 hours to instill a joy and value of learning in our kids? You remember when we were teachers in Blythe, I mean, we had truancy issues, we had absence issues, but what we did was we would make our class be so important, so valuable, and so enriching, that we used to have kids come to school who were sick just for our class. I mean, that's the way it was even when I was teaching. I mean, I would have kids coming in like coughing up a lung, like, "What are you doing?" "You may teach me the way today," it's yeah. And that's the thing. Like, what are you doing in your class to make this such a, and when you say joyful, it doesn't mean it has to be entertaining. It doesn't mean it has to be happy. It doesn't have to be a circus. What are you doing to make this an educational, enriching environment that brings the joy of learning back into it? And when I go to learner-based, I really think that teachers, and I suggest it to them, because my thing is this, is that I take a line from a Peloton instructor: I make suggestions, you make decisions. Is that instead of looking at things as performance-based, which is, what do I need to teach? What do I want them to know, understand, and do? How they do and how I do. That's performance-based. And I like to say that's like Journey's Don't Stop Believing. Some will win, some will lose, and some are born to sing the blues. And if you have that from an education standpoint, some will pass, some will fail. Some really need some accommodations to make sure that they can succeed. But if they don't, well, I guess, the cards are stacked against them, unfortunately. That's not a positive situation for anyone. But if we flip it to say, well, what exactly must the kids learn? And that's set by the standards. And there's a lot of controversy and a lot of contention over what the standards and how they should be understood and used. How deeply they should learn it is measured by the standards. How many objectives must they achieve to demonstrate proficiency in this subject and perform successfully at this given grade level? So that's where the science of teaching comes in. And also, what are the essential knowledge and skills that they must develop? But the art of teaching then gets to be, where are they in their learning? And that's where we can start getting a little of a critical thinker to ourselves. Maybe that's even a little more of a science of to say, where are they? The creative artistic part is, where are they where they can perform successfully? And then from there, building on their strengths, what do they need to succeed and how could they learn it? That's where we really get creative with it. And I think that not only could make that classroom more of a joyful place for learning, but I also think that would make teaching more joyful, because it's not a joyful profession right now. It's a hard profession, physically, physiologically, psychologically,
emotionally, intellectually? I mean, what can we do to make this a more joyful experience? I think that's the big thing.
And I think when you talk about, going back to the joy of learning and the value of curiosity, it's obviously education has had a really, since I've been teaching, education has really tried to create some accountability, and in terms of like students got to learn. That's the result. That's the product. Students need to learn. They need to, and then that's our product. Since when I moved here in 1999, there was always the push of, at least it seems to me, that the attitude towards a lot of administration was, we can't control the students, we can't control the parents, so let's get on the teachers, and then let's make the teachers accountable. But students don't really need to be students don't really need to be accountable, and it kind of falls apart when, okay, we're accountable. Why aren't the students accountable? Why aren't the parents accountable?
Because there's no teeth,
and
there's no teeth in anything of this, and you're describing the whole standards-based reform movement since 2001. I mean, that's when the shift went from assessing for excellence to enforcing accountability. When you and I started teaching, that was when you saw the rise of outcomes-based learning. I mean, we taught stuff. You and I were in school and students. We taught stuff. We didn't have standards. We did what the teacher taught us. We did what they told us. And if you did it the way that they taught you and the way the textbook told you, you got not only an A in achievement, but you also got an A in conduct. Mm-hmm. That standards, that's the interesting thing. Standards have only been around as a policy for a half century. That since the 1990s, that's when we saw it emerge. And then at the turn of the century, turn of millennium, that's where it went into overdrive. It's funny because I'm writing my new book on simplifying standards and really rethinking our understanding and use of standards. And if you look at what the purpose of standards are and what the intent of standards-based education reform was, the purpose of standards is to basically clarify what exactly and how deeply kids have to demonstrate and discuss their learning in a specific subject at a given grade level. That became a criteria for success in the accountability movement. The intent of standards and standards-based reform was actually to elevate excellence and ensure equity, which is funny to think about, because one of the things that the biggest complaints about the standards-based reform movement and the standards themselves is that they are inequitable. But that's historically even why we've had standards. This whole thing for accountability, and what accountability is, and I'm going to be bold enough to say this, it's marketing and advertising. That a school can say, we are an A school. We are a B. Back in the day when they used to use terms like excelling and highly performing and performing plus and performing, and the sign industry,
most distinguished schools.
Yeah, we're a distinguished school. Then all of a sudden we got a letter grade, because now we can't say, oh, we're a C school. But what is that? What is it even now? I mean, since the pandemic, that how many schools out there have A's? And I can say that right now in Arizona, we have schools that have 40% literacy rates and 40% numeracy rates. And the schools got A. Why? Because they got growth. Okay, growth from what? You're going from 20% to 40%. That's great. But that's not even a real number, even, because you just got lucky. And that's the whole thing about accountability, is that we're judging kids based upon one day or over the course of 1 week. That's a sports mentality.
It doesn't matter how you did all season. It matters whether you won the big game or you won the best of 7 series. I mean, think about football teams. There's only one football team that had a perfect season. That was the Miami Dolphins back in the 70s. What do people remember about the New England Patriots? That they went 19 or that they lost the one? What do they remember about the Panthers? That they went 19 or they lost the one? Yeah, but you didn't win the Super Bowl. So you got these kids who are demonstrating growth, and that's great. But then you got this test that says, they didn't do well. And what happened on that day? I mean, maybe that was the day the kid was sick, or maybe that was the day something happened in the child's life. Maybe they woke up on the wrong side of bed. Maybe they found out their parents are getting divorced. Maybe we're just over assessing the kids so much that they don't see the buy-in, that they don't see the value, because the ones who get bit are the teachers. And that's the whole thing. Like, what are we doing? School, Phyllis, ideally, because you hear people always say, like, well, school's not really about learning. School is about, making the workers and da-da. You know what? I'm sorry. School should be about learning. School should be about the joy of learning, the joy of discovery, the joy of development, the joy of learning and realizing what's out there and what you can do with what's out there. And yeah, are there things that are going to be obstacles for people? Absolutely. But what could they do? What is their potential? I think that's what school should be. We should look at not so much, performance, but we should look at potential for performance. Look at, if they're performing this way, why are they forming this way?
I agree, but like as you said earlier, it's about marketing. It's about being like the A+ school or whatever, because there's always these administrators who are trying to climb up the ladder and trying to get a promotion. And if their school is a good school, that'll help them get the promotion.
You know what, James? I would even counter that. I don't think it's even so much the promotion anymore. I think they just want people off their back, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just like there's so much pressure on these principals to perform, to have their schools perform, and I feel for them. It's a wicked problem. And I worked with a principal. He just says, man, I can't get more than the B. And basically it's because he's at this level of excellence that where else can you go? What else can you do? You're at this level of excellence. Your teachers are effective. Your kids are achieving. Where else do you go? I also just had this conversation with a school in a high performing area where their percentages of proficiency are above average of 70%. They're 80%. And the attitude is, well, our kids should be doing better. Well, why? Life's about meeting expectations, and your kids are meeting expectations. Exceeding expectations is a choice. It's a personal choice. So what are we doing to encourage our students who are meeting the expectations to exceed? And what are we doing when we get the kids to meet the expectations? What are we doing to say, okay, now that you did this, here's what else you can do with it? I mean, it's what Simon Sinek calls an infinite game. It's basically not just, hey, we did this year. It's now what? And that's what good leadership does. That's he talks about Apple, and he talks about how people have a finite game. We got to do this. He talks a great story about during the MP3 player days that Microsoft wanted to make a better MP3 player than the iPod, and they did it. It was called the Zune. They met their finite goal. They made a better MP3 player than the iPod. And when Sinek went and talked to the C-level executives of Apple, he said, hey, you know what? Microsoft made this this MP3 player. It's better than the iPod. And the C-level executive said, yep, they probably did. Because they're already on to the next iteration. That's the thing, is that that's the thing about schools, is that you got this letter grade, and well, what does that mean? And now it's like, great, you did this year, but what's going to happen next year? How can we keep progressing towards excellence? How can we maintain our excellence? How can we grow from our excellence? That's I think the big thing. And I feel for these principals, because that letter grade, it's the sword that people make them die on. And I think once upon a time it was about moving up in the ranks. Now it's just like, get off my back.
So the school, like this the principal that you mentioned, who's getting a B can't get higher than a B. Is there any potential for growth, or do you think they're maxed out? They can't. I mean, that's what I don't understand, because I'm all for growth. I think growth is important, but you want to keep growing, you want to keep improving. There's always room for improvement, but he's in that situation where he can't get higher than a B. But like you said, it's successful. They've achieved their goals. But what you're saying is, if the perception is that they're kind of standing still, then that's a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. And it's like, don't look at it from the letter grade. The letter grade, I mean, this is the funny thing. Everything we talk about, we don't want our students to focus on. We focus on as a system and a profession. That it shouldn't be about grades. It should be about learning. Okay. But we live and die like, oh my gosh, my school got a B. Well, why'd they get a B? And that's the thing, is that when you look at basically performance and you're meeting the expectation, now it's not about ability. Everybody has the ability to do their best, but to be the best is a willingness. To be better, to be better is a willingness. Like, I could just say, hey, you know what, I wrote 3 books, and I could basically just write the same thing I've written in every book, but I want to be better. That's the whole thing. That's the difference in the dynamics. And that's the thing, is that you got to be, well, are your kids learning? Yes. Are they taking away what they've learning? Yes. Are they performing at high levels? Absolutely. Then what do you want? Well, I want the A. Well, see, that's performance-based. See what I mean? That's what I mean by performance-based, not learner-based. Performance-based is about us, how they do, how I do. Learner-based is, what do they need to succeed? That's the big thing. And that's where questioning comes in, because the thing is this, is that when it comes to going and basically teaching, I could tell you what you need to know, understand, and do. I can assess you to see how you did and use that to see how I did as a teacher. But if I believe you can do well, if I know what exactly you have to learn to do well, if I know how deeply you have to learn to do well, if I know what are the essential knowledge and skills that you have to develop, which do you have and which do you don't, if I know where you are in your learning and maybe even why you're there and what do you need to succeed, I really believe that we could elevate the excellence that we're looking for.
Yeah, but I mean, it comes down to, again, like you said, we focus on things we tell students not to focus on. Like, don't worry about, like, oh, I need an A. And, well, no, well, you had a D last quarter. Now you moved up to a B minus. That you should be proud of that. That shows growth. But it comes down to, okay, what's your GPA? They want a scholarship. They want to get, they want to get into the right colleges and everything. So again, it comes down to, letter grades, because that's the, that's what they're after. So because that's the system, because it's the system that's rewarding that. Okay, you got a 4.0 GPA or weighted GPA, and okay, now you're going to get to they want to get to the right college. They want to get to their first choice and everything. But what it sounds like to me is that it used to be called, I think, authentic teaching, or like portfolio performance, portfolio based, where it's like, okay, did they learn something? Are they getting something out of it? How did you do? Did you teach them well? Did they learn? Did they understand? And did they succeed? As opposed to, you know, perform based on these standards. And okay, now, you know, okay, oh, here are your standards, and okay, did you do well on these? Okay, great. Here's your, you know, here's your A plus. Here's your, you know, and then you get the reward. Unfortunately, it's almost kind of, it's like corporatized. You know, the schools are. Is that kind of fair to say? The school system's kind of corporatized now.
I think the business of school is. I don't think. I think that the operation of school, and it's really interesting, because you take a corporate mentality with an organization that the product is your students, that the assembly line and traditionally of what the school produced was a scholar, and we moved them down the assembly line, and we produce this basic product of the learner, of the student becoming being the learner, and the student graduating and going on to the world. It's not like that anymore, and it can't be like that anymore. And I'm not saying go full pendulum to another thing, but we keep on looking for fixes and solutions, and there's not. And we need to understand that this is what's known as a wicked problem. You can't solve it. You can address it, you can handle it, you can resolve it, you can settle it, you can even avoid and abandon it. That's actually a theory, a philosophy out there called wicked problems, a theory by Horst Rittel and Melvin Weber. And the whole idea is that these are the type of government and policy problems that impact life, that you're not going to get. There's not going to be a simple solution. There's not a step-by-step process to make it better. The solutions actually eventually become the problems. And the thing, that's why it's wicked. It's tricky. It's taxing. It's troubling. That, like Roddy Piper used to say, just when you think you have the answers, I change the question. You know, that's the thing. And you think about it with kids, and I've been really thinking about it lately. And again, going back to the questioning of it, is that we keep on talking about these kids are different. These kids are different. These kids are different. These kids are different behaviorally. We don't really talk about how these kids are different academically. There's a study that just came out today that kids that are on social media and TikTok more, they have problems retaining. Yeah, they do. Because to them, answers come free. That to them, I can go on my keyboard, I can go bip, bop, boop. And back in the day, we had calculators. It was a calculator world. And then it became a Google society. Now we're in this AI environment where the answers can be explained to us in a language that we can understand. These kids, they want to know how and why. They really want to know how and why. And if we keep on teaching them teach to get the answer, but not how was that answer attained? Why is that answer correct or incorrect? Well, what about, and what if this situation here? Should it be this or should it be that? What else can we do now that we have the answers? That basically, that's the modern learner. And we keep on teaching them. We keep on telling them stuff. They're tired of being told. If they want to be told, they can go on their phones and they can go on AI. If they want to be told, they can do that. We need to have the kids think critically and creatively about how, why, what if, is it this or that? What else?
How else? What could we do with what we've learned? And if teachers did that, I'm telling you right now, our lives would be so much easier than what it is. Because I always say this, I always say to teachers, how many of you are working hard today? And they raise their hand. I said, how many of you are exhausted? And they raise their hand. I said, how exhausted do you think your kids are? Probably not. And I said, well, we need to flip the script. I ask how many of you have kids, and they go, mom, dad, I got to go to soccer practice. I got to go to dance. I got to do this. And you're like, oh my God, just give me an hour just to get my thoughts together. We need to flip that script. We need to have the adults or the teachers go home and go, come on, we got to go to dance. You got to go to soccer. Oh my gosh, my teacher's been asking me questions all day. I've been having to not only just answer correctly, but explain with examples and provide evidence and examine an employee and evaluate with that. And I've been extending my thinking. Just give me 5 minutes. We need our kids to be more exhausted learning than we are teaching, because
you know what? That's you got it, because it's and there was always a push to do that, but it's almost kind of like we're micromanaging. Like when you have bosses who micromanage, they were the worst bosses because they kept micromanaging. But we need to stop the micromanaging. But it kind of comes in full circle when I go to ask, since the kids already know. They can look on Google, they can do a chat GPT AI, and they can ask, what was the metaphor in this in the Road Not Taken, or what's or stuff like that. They already know that. They can, like you said, they can look that up. But you're questioning. It's delving deeper into it's creating roots. Roots go all over. It's kind of like, well, how, what made you think that way, or again, all those kinds of questions that really make you force the student to really delve deeper into it. And I, again, like the Socratic seminars, Socratic method, questions. Socrates would always teach lessons by asking questions.
Right. But you also got to be careful of that, because then what happens is you get into the programmatic element of it, or the procedural element of it. And I always tell people when they do like Socratic seminars that Socrates didn't put everyone in a circle, and the inner circle had this responsibility, the outer circle had this responsibility, and it wasn't structured. It was, the question got put out there and it got messy. It got very messy. That basically.
Well, that's good, right?
I'm sorry?
That could be good, right?
It should be. That's the way it should be. That's when people go, oh, we're going to do our Socratic seminar today. And it's just, now you're more focused on following the rules than engaging in the experience. Like you could walk into a room and I could say to someone, like, basically, so how does the outsiders address the idea of brotherhood and family? Now we're going to start reading about that. And then I use questioning to do that. Okay, so the level 1 question, or what's called DOK 1 question, depth of knowledge category 1 question, would be, in the outsiders, who are the brothers who are related to each other? That's a hard question, but it's a simple question. It's hard because you got to remember who they were and you got to remember their names. But it's simple, not only in that there's only one answer you can give. It's simple is that the answer is simple. Go read the book and find out, So then you got what's called a DOK2 or category 2 question, would be, how are the greasers like brothers, and how is their relationship like a family? Now I need to give you examples from the book. And then when I say, so what is S.E. Hinton implying about brotherhood and family? You hope that child, and you guide that child for them to make the thematic statement. And the thematic statement most likely will be, family's not just who you're related to, family's who you're close to. Now they got to give you evidence from the story. So now
that's called a level 3 DOK3 question, where they have to give you evidence. Whenever you have to give evidence, that's called a level 3 of learning, DOK3, in the framework that I based it on. The level 4 would be, okay, now I want you to go read another S.E. Hinton book. You could read Rumblefish. You can read That Was Then, This Is Now. By the way, guys, guess what? That's the unofficial sequel to The Outsiders. Oh, really? Now I want to read. Okay. Mm-hmm. Or you can read Tex. And you say, what does S.E. Hinton imply about brotherhood and family in her books? Now I'm doing an author study. Or if I'm doing a genre study, talking about how Edgar Allan Poe's stories address common motifs and themes, and what impact and influence did he have not only on literature but other aspects of life. Or if I'm teaching math, the thing is, what's interesting is that most math teachers, and I'm not being critical when I talk, James, it's not being criticizing. It's like Jeff Bridges tells the story the way it's always been done. Math teachers teach like math teachers. Here's how you do it. Here's how you get the answer. These kids, you know what they need to do to get the answer? They need to go on a calculator. But they need to also know how to use that calculator. So I'll give you an example. I was working with a middle school student a couple of weeks ago, and they were reading There Will Come Soft Rains. Remember the Ray Bradbury story about the house? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they realized the message was that as good as technology is, it will not replace people, that people will always be needed. Because if you remember the story, the house was still automated and still functioned, even though the people weren't there. But then when it had something where it threw it off, the house blew up, the branch causing the fire. So I asked them, I said, so what is this saying to you about technology? And what's interesting is that what was science fiction to Ray Bradbury is now science fact when it comes to smart homes. So I said, well, let's bring this, let's go from global to local. I'm going to give you a math problem and I'll let you use your calculator. Oh, really? My teacher never lets me use my calculator. Well, yeah, well, you can use your calculator for this. So I said, okay, I have a cell phone that's $800. It is marked down to $550. What is the difference in price? That's question number one. And what % off is the cell phone? You can use your calculator for both. So one of his friends goes, the difference is $250. And I said, okay, great. You're right, but why? He couldn't explain it. And he just knew it. And that is something that used to be rewarded. But in this day and age, the future of education, the people who are going to have the power in the future are the ones who can communicate clearly, not the ones who can think deeply. It's the ones who can express it and share it in a way that people can understand. So the kid does it with the calculator. He subtracts 550 from 800. He gets 250. And I said, okay, now what's the % off? And he didn't know how to do it. And I said, what's the matter? You got the calculator right there. Yeah, but how do I get the % off? See what I mean? The machines are going to give us the answer, but we need to think critically about how that answer was attained, why that answer is correct. Well, wait a minute. What if about this situation? Should we do this or that? And what else? And that's the curiosity, but also giving the kids the experience of discovery, of experimentation, of the opportunity to explain, the opportunity to justify. Mm-hmm. That's what kids remember. Kids don't remember stuff. Doesn't matter. When we were growing up, we were pat on the head because we can name the presidents in chronological order and probably their vice presidents. Now it's just, bip, bop, boop here. Okay. Or even the states. Can you name all the states in alphabetical order and their capitals? Bip, bop, boop here. Well, how'd the states get their names? That's the thing. Why is it that as you go further west, the square mileage of states increases? There's no Delaware or Rhode Island or Connecticut on the West Coast. You have these huge, California is the size practically of the whole East Coast, the whole Eastern seaboard.
And how many states you got there? Okay. Well, what if a state wanted to secede from the nation? Could it? Is it permissible? Can it happen? How about this? Should we continue to be 50 states, or should we go to 51? Or if not 51, maybe we don't go to 51 because we need to go to 52. Do we need to basically have an odd number of states or an even number of states? So what will adopting a 51st state do in Congress?
Well, if it benefits one party, that's probably why they will do it.
Right. So now we're going to go
yeah.
to what? So there's 100 senators, right? So if we go 51st state, now we're at 102 senators, right? But also, what happens in the House? Is there going to be an odd number? Is it going to be? I mean, that's the whole thing. Is that what is this now going to do? But see, that's the learning that's worth learning. That's the thing. Is that
I kind of see it as kind of filling the gaps of understanding and no, that's great. And there was a lot more I wanted to get to today.
Well, we can still get to it if you don't got to like sum it up. I know we got limited time, but this is what questioning's all about. It's
sure. No, this is great. And I try to every year I try to apply that into my teaching, focusing more on questioning and having them make their own connections. And I've tried the Socratic seminar, and I know I didn't do it very well, but again, I'll keep getting it better. Kids expect structure, especially when if they have to, they're not used to creative thinking. I can tell they're not used to thinking creatively or critically. They kind of want to be spoon-fed everything, and that's the hard part is getting them to become more independent.
Here's my question to you. Do they crave structure or they crave security?
That's a great question. Probably both.
Well,
probably both. Because they again, a creative student would probably need more assurance, more self-confidence, and so they kind of feel like they want to be kind of protected. So I think you answer your question probably a little bit of both.
It's a balance. I mean, there's no right answer, and that's what makes it a good question.
Sure.
It's right. Debatable. Like you're right, I'm right. Is that some people say, well, they need structure because they need to know what's expected and they need to know that things are going to be this way. And I say, well, does it not sound like security?
Yeah.
And that's the thing is that what about the kids that, you got so many kids, and this is what I tell people, that the reason why we sometimes have behavior issues, you've tried to push a square peg in a round hole. What happens? I get rough around the edges. You told me you worked with some of the hardest population of students. I mean, you work with incarcerated kids, right?
Yeah.
So think about this. The value of learning that they have in this environment that, I mean, I don't know what their sentences are, but the value of learning is not just education, it's experience, that's expertise. And the thing is that so they can't read, write, and do the math, right? But what can they do? What can they do? And to tell you the truth, there's a saying even in the gifted world that the most gifted people in the world are behind bars because they're divergent thinkers. They don't think the rules apply to them. So what are we doing to make someone realize the value of learning? I think that's the big thing.
That's really key, because I remember years ago there was a study done that said that the majority of, and I'm sure it's probably applied somewhat today, is that the majority of high school dropouts were kinesthetic learners, hands-on learners, more, kids who again, who would think outside the box, who were more creative in terms of like they knew how to work with their hands. They were more outgoing, more athletic, but they didn't necessarily like the books. And it kind of goes back to, every episode I mention Howard Gardner's quote, and I'm paraphrasing. It's not how smart you are; it's how are you smart. And I think that's kind of like, I think you're kind of touching on that a little bit. Is that, again, there's no one right way. There's no one right answer. And to sum up, and I think this will be appropriate, because I definitely want you back again sometime. We'll coordinate that. We'll talk a little bit more.
Anytime.
Okay,
I appreciate you giving me the forum to wax philosophical.
Great. And then I'll give you a chance to promote your website and your book and your training and all that. But we'll leave off this. George Lucas, when he was being interviewed on PBS with Bill Moyer. This, I think, was right when the Phantom Menace came out, and I really love this, because Bill Moyer was saying, he says Star Wars has a lot of religious overtones, like with the Force and everything, and he asked George Lucas. He said, which religion do you think got it right? And George Lucas said something really amazing. He said, well, I think they all got it right, but each one only saw one part of the elephant. And I thought, wow, that's, when you think about that, you're right, I'm right, but maybe you and I are only see just two little parts, and there's a much bigger picture out there.
Well, that's the communication part of it. That's where, not even agree to disagree, but learn from each other. Like,
right.
One of the things people will say about me is that they'll say, you're not listening to me. And I say, absolutely, you're absolutely incorrect. I am listening to you. I'm just not agreeing with you. I'm listening, I'm learning, but I'm not agreeing with you. And that's a whole different thing. That it is our responsibility to share. It is where people are not required to take it. But we need to be respectful of each other. But what's interesting about even George Lucas is that George Lucas is the epitome of what it means to be gifted, which is a divergent thinker. Because if you ever read the original script for the Star Wars, it didn't make sense. And it's kind of funny, ironic, because I've been talking about it lately, is that what happens when people get so powerful or have this modicum of success that we all of a sudden don't ask, are you sure that's a good idea? Are you sure that's needed? Are you really sure about this? I mean, you think about it, is that George Lucas could do whatever he wanted to do after Star Wars. And then Empire Strikes Back, he even can do it more. So what does he do? He makes these furry little creatures called Ewoks, and he says that these are going to be the people that destroy that fight the Empire. Not many people realize that actually was in the original Star Wars script, but they were Wookiees, and people didn't get it, and they confused it to the fact that, well, Planet of the Apes just came out. This just sounds like Planet of the Apes again. So he said, fine, forget it. And he did this World War II illusion with the X-Wing going after the Death Stars and like a Battle of Midway. And so then he does that. And then he comes out with the Phantom Menace and he introduces Jar Jar Binks. Nobody understands it. He puts a scientific aspect to the Force and says how many midichlorians are in his blood system. Nobody understands it. He understands it, but nobody does. And that's where sometimes where you have to basically ask the question, you sure this is the right thing to do? And I think that's the problem, is that we are not willing to ask questions, and we're afraid to ask questions, and we're afraid to speak up. That even from the standpoint, okay, let's even say Steven Spielberg, who's gifted and talented. Did you really need to make a remake of West Side Story?
Or how about even the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Okay, is this really working in your favor? Is this really the smart thing to do? We get this over reliance sometimes in our learning and our intelligence. And the thing is, we got to have that bold humility and ask, well, I'm right, but why? And we also need to be able to say, I may not be right. And that's tying it back to your thing about George Lucas, is that, yeah, everybody was right when it came to religion. The question wasn't whether they were right. The question was, are you willing to listen why you may be wrong?
Excellent. So how can people reach you or act, with your training and everything and the books? Go ahead and let people know how they can reach out to you.
Well, there's my website, Maverick Education, Maverik. There's no C in Maverick. I'm not Tom Cruise. It's named after my daughters, Madison, Avery, and me. It is allusion to Top Gun. That is one of my favorite movies. So Maverick, Maverik, education.com. And they can basically go on social media. I'm on LinkedIn under Erik Francis. I'm moving away from Twitter just because Twitter is what it is, what it's become. Do some things on Instagram, Maverick Education. But, I'm also trying to move a little bit away from social media. I would say probably the best place to go is to go to my website. And I think, we talked about some deep stuff here, and we got really deep and philosophical, but you know what? That's what learning needs to be. And if people go like this, with a blowing, like, oh my gosh, that was a lot. Or maybe people say, who cares? I care. You care. We need to engage and encourage kids to care about what they're learning. Why are they learning the Pythagorean theorem? Because they can build houses with the Pythagorean theorem, because they can shoot goals into soccer nets, because they can do football plays. Why are they reading Shakespeare? Because isn't it ironic that the greatest love story, that they die at the end? So the question was that really love, or was it something else? Or Macbeth and Brutus from Julius Caesar. They're what's known as Shakespearean tragic heroes, people of great stature who fall from grace and get tempted and science. Like I used to say because I taught all the subject there, I used to get out of my I used to give up my prep hour to make extra money, and I used to say, I'm going to teach you science fact, scientific theory, and Michael Crichton science. And they go, what do you mean by that? And he goes, well, the fact is that there's a thing called cells. The theory is that all life starts with cells. And Michael Crichton science is, well, let's go figure out if we should go bring back the dinosaurs. So it's like, what are we doing to have people care and to have these deeper conversations? And I like to say, do you know why it's called Trivial Pursuit? Because the pursuit is trivial. Great. You know a lot of stuff. You won the game. Now what? That's the meaning of Trivial Pursuit these days. So you know a lot of facts. Fantastic. You can win at Jeopardy, maybe.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming down. This was a lot more fun. Actually, it was like 1,000 times more fun talking to somebody as opposed to just speaking. This is great, and it was a first for me having you're my very first guest, and hope you're welcome to come back anytime. And I really appreciate you coming, and we could talk forever, and we could stay and talk a few minutes after once we log off here, but I really appreciate it. And this is JP's Teachers Lounge season 1, episode 5. We're visiting Mr. Erik Francis and his new book, Inquiring Minds Want to Learn. Please check it out. If you're a teacher, if you know someone who's a teacher, or even if you're just curious, it's a great read. It's not like a summer beach reading like at the beach, but it is a great reading. So I want to thank all of you. you can reach me at jamespasutichcommunications.com, and I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn. And I want to thank everybody and have a great night.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.